HBO's new Game of Thrones spin-off House of the Dragon looks like it is going to immerse viewers in the dark and turbulent world of Westeros again, as two rival branches of the Targaryen dynasty strive for control of the Iron Throne. One of the key players in the saga will be Rhaenyra Targaryen, the eldest child of King Viserys and supposedly his heir. A fascinating and at times enigmatic figure, Rhaenyra is sure to emerge as one of the most fascinating characters in the series, and so it is worth taking a look at some of the things that only book readers know about her and her life. She was only half Targaryen. There are many powerful noble houses in Game of Thrones, and Rhaenyra hails from two of them. Despite the long-established practice of Targaryens marrying siblings in order to keep their bloodlines pure, Rhaenyra's father actually married outside of his home. On her mother's side, she was from House Arryn, who were known for ruling the Vale. While this seemed to shield her from some of the less palatable elements of the Targaryen genetics, including its madness, it also helped to sow yet another seed of the conflict that would ultimately engulf Westeros. She became her father's heir at a young age. Westeros has had the fortune and misfortune to be ruled by kings who were both good and evil. Though Rhaenyra's father, Viserys, was mostly seen as a good king, he made the decision to anoint her his heir at a very young age. However, rather than continuing to solidify this identity as his reign progressed, he instead chose to largely push aside the issue of the succession for as long as possible. This made it that much more difficult for Rhaenyra when she was at last poised to take the throne upon her father's death. She had two brothers who died young. There have, of course, been many deaths in Game of Thrones, and so it is not surprising that this would also be the case in House of the Dragon and the book upon which it is based, Fire and Blood. Rhaenyra's mother actually produced not one but two sons for her husband Viserys, but unfortunately, both of these died young. This was not only tragic and very sad for both of the parents but also, as time would prove, more than a little disastrous for the realm as a whole, since it set the stage for the later conflict between Rhaenyra and her half-brother Aegon. Her standard was a mix of houses. Heraldry is very important in the world of Game of Thrones, as it says a great deal about a particular house's allegiance and what they believe. Rhaenyra, in keeping with general practice, quartered the usual Targaryen dragon with two other notable sigils. The seahorse of House Velaryon, that of her husband, and that of the moon and falcon of her mother's house. In doing so, she wanted to show the rest of the realm how much power and influence she was able to wield and the houses whose loyalty she would make use of. She lost her virginity to her uncle. Throughout the history of Westeros, there have been many notable Targaryens, but few are quite as imposing as Daemon Targaryen. Sure to be one of Matt Smith's best characters, it was clear from early on that there was a remarkable bond between Daemon and his niece, Rhaenyra. Many of the chroniclers agree that he was, in fact, the one who took her virginity. In fact, their relationship would become one of the most important in Westeros, as Rhaenyra would eventually marry her uncle and bear him several children. She married twice. Given that she was a princess, it's not surprising that Rhaenyra would marry, not only to solidify her father's power, but also to establish her own power base. First, she married a scion of House Velaryon, one of the most dominant noble families in Westeros. They were in command of a significant fleet. Secondly, she married her uncle Daemon, a man with whom she had been very much in love since she was very young. As was often the case, Rhaenyra was a person who was determined to have her own way, no matter what. There were rumors that her first three sons were bastards. Rhaenyra's first marriage was not a particularly happy one, as it seemed that her husband much preferred the company of men. Thus, there were rumors that the three boys that she bore him were, in fact, the product of an affair she had with Sir Harwin Strong. In fact, it was precisely this belief that would motivate her younger half-brothers to taunt her sons with the fact that they might be bastards. As is so often the case in Westeros, this led to the shedding of blood and great destruction. She quickly lost control of the city of King's Landing though she had the makings of a great ruler. It very quickly became clear that Rhaenyra had inherited some of the less palatable traits of her ancestors. In particular, she didn't seem to care much about what the common people thought about her and her rule. Thus, even though she was eventually able to capture King's Landing, she wasn't able to hold it for very long. Her pride and her stubbornness ultimately got the better of her, and, like the real Queen Matilda upon whom she was based, she was forced to flee her own city. The Iron Throne seemed to reject her. Few objects in Game of Thrones are as talismanic as the Iron Throne, which is one of the most important in the entire city. Book readers know that it seems to accept or reject those who sit upon its cruel spikes. In Rhaenyra's case, she was unable to sit on it without incurring cuts and scrapes of various kinds. Though she would continue to do so, it was clear to those who watched that the Iron Throne itself had rejected her rule, a sinister omen that was to prove all too true. She was suspicious and never forgot a slight given her somewhat turbulent upbringing, as well as the circumstances surrounding her accession. It makes sense that she would become quite bitter. It would ultimately transpire that she was the type of person who never forgot a slight or an offense. While this might have made sense to her as a person, it didn't make her a particularly lovable queen. In fact, it was precisely her unwillingness to let go of a slight or a grievance that would ultimately doom her reign.